Hey guys, welcome back to the channel and another video. This week's video, we will be doing a full cost and profit analysis of this dining table, bench, and chairs dining set that I built here. So I'll show you how I built the table, but we'll also look at the cost of materials, the amount of time it took me to build all of this, and how much money I made from this set in the very end. So if you do watch this video, I actually have a favor to ask, and that favor is that if you have an opinion on the breakdown of this as far as the cost of materials, how much I charged, how much I made, or anything like that, drop a comment down below. I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions on the cost breakdown of this. So let me know if you think I charged too much or I charged not enough. Would you buy this table for this price, or would you make this table for this price? With all that said, let's go ahead and get started on the video. Alright, so here is a look at the boards that the tabletop will be made from. This is 6/4 inch red oak, and all of these boards are rough cut, meaning that it will take quite a bit of effort for me to get them all squared up and milled up properly. But that's okay, because it gives me the opportunity to mill up everything exactly how I want, and I don't have to rely on anybody else milling these up hoping that they did a good job. So these boards I have are actually some massive boards. They're about 16 inches wide, and to make them easier to work with, but also to get rid of that center flat sawn grain, I'll be cutting them into 3 pieces with the track saw, and then keeping the straight grain board on the outside of each board to make up the center of the tabletop. So here's a look at the boards before we'll go through the typical milling process of the joiner, planer, and table saw. So now, as far as the materials go for this tabletop, this table was a custom request size, 30 inches wide by 7 feet long. But the milling process will remove a bit of material on each dimension of the board. So for simplification purposes, rather than 30 inches, let's say that I use 36 inches, which happens to fall right at 3 feet wide. So you can see here that using the joiner and the table saw, we'll take a little bit of that material off. So that's where the extra 6 inches is coming from. I may not have been exactly at taking 6 inches off, but like I said, we'll just keep it simple and assume that I'm using 36 inches width of board for this tabletop. And now the same thing is true with the length of the board. So this is a 7-foot tabletop. I will be adding breadboards onto the end of each of these. So I leave the boards a little long in case I have to cut off any of the snipe, which will come from planing these slab pieces, which we'll see here in a minute. But once again, just to keep it simple, let's say that I'm using 8 linear feet for the top of this. So 3 feet wide by 8 feet long gives us 24 square foot area of board, but this is 1.5 inches thick. So multiplying 24 by 1.5 gives me 36 board foot of 6/4 red oak, which I purchased for $5 a board foot rough sawn, which comes out to a grand total of $193 just for the rough sawn boards alone before I had even begun working on them. So I passed the slab tabletop pieces through the planer one more time to get rid of those glue seams, and then also that last breadboard piece is planed down to the same thickness. Then we can glue these 2 slabs together. Because the final width of the top will be too wide for my planer, I'm going to use dominoes to help line everything up perfectly in the middle. I think I ended up using 4 dominoes or so. And dominoes are fairly inexpensive when you buy them in the bulk pack, so I think these dominoes were around 50 cents a piece, which adds another $2 to the total, which means that we are at a running total of $195 at this point. So between milling the rough boards up, having the first glue up, planing these slabs down one more time, and then cutting the dominoes and gluing these boards together, that took me a total of 3 hours and 20 minutes, obviously not including the drying time overnight for those. So right now we are at $195 for a grand total of 3 hours and 20 minutes actually worked on this tabletop. One thing that I've learned as I continue to build these tabletops and do different projects is that it is absolutely worth the extra 10 or 15 minutes to slow down and take your time when you're building something. Make sure that you have good glue seams and all your joints are perfectly square, which will save you a lot of sanding time in the long run. If you maybe spend an extra 20 minutes here, that'll save you an hour of sanding down the road. And using a level or a straight edge across this tabletop is a perfect example of that, because this tabletop has to be flat during the glue up. If it's not, I'm going to have to sand or plane this thing down by hand, which will take a ton of time. Or even potentially worse, if that middle seam ends up with a big gap, you may have to rip it right down the middle, re-glue those slabs up again, which will take an additional amount of time, which you want to avoid if you can. Trust me on this one, as I have been there before, and that is not something that is a whole lot of fun to do. So after a little center joint cleanup, we are ready to get started on the breadboards for this tabletop. And a very common question is, how do you avoid snipe whenever you're running something through the planer? As you can see right there, I have snipe on one of the sides of these slabs. So rather than worrying about how to avoid snipe, you just simply cut it off, and then it's gone forever, and you don't have to worry about trying to avoid snipe. This obviously will take a little bit more board, and you're having a little bit of extra waste, but I found out that it's better to have some extra waste rather than finish this off and then have snipe showing. So the breadboard is just an additional board that we milled from the tabletop earlier, which was included in the price we mentioned earlier. Now, if you want a full detailed video on how and what exactly I'm doing to attach these breadboards, check out the video at the top of the screen, as that video will go much more in depth than we have time for in this video. But for the condensed version of what I'm doing here, I'm first taking the domino to cut mortises on the inside of the tabletop as well as the breadboards. These will line up perfectly with each other. And then I'll mill up some custom dominoes of my own out of some 4/4 red oak stock, which will be used for the dominoes. This isn't necessarily a difficult process, it just does take a little bit of extra time. But anyways, I ended up using somewhere around 2 board feet of 4/4 red oak. Now this was purchased separately from those 6/4 boards that we used for the tabletop, and I get red oak for just a little over $4 a board foot, so add another $9 to the running total, and then I'll have to use a dowel rod to put these breadboards on. I think the dowel rod was somewhere in the neighborhood of $5, so at this point we need to add another $14 to that running total, which puts us right at $209 for the entire material of this tabletop, including all of the boards as well as the breadboards and the dominoes that I built here. I really need to figure out a way to build a proper jig for what I'm doing here, but I used the domino setting to cut the elongated slots rather than the drill press, which worked very well, although I would not recommend cutting those the way that I did, as there could be a risk of some kickback or that tenon piece kicking away from you during the cut. So be sure to keep an eye out for a potential future video that shows how to use a jig to cut those slots using the domino. But anyway, I first glue those tenons into place, and then after the glue is dried, I'll use those tenons to mark the hole, which I will cut with the drill press. Now, like I mentioned earlier, if you're interested in this process, be sure to check out the other video that I already did on this, which goes into a ton of detail. And I don't think I've seen any other videos at all where the breadboards are attached this way, so I may be a little bit of bias because this is the method that I came up with, but I feel like it works very well. So I did leave a slight offset whenever I cut the tenons out to make sure there would be a drawbore effect from the dowel rods, but after that breadboard is pinned tightly, we can then cut the excess off, and the entire breadboard process, including lining the breadboards and the tabletop up, cutting the mortises, making the tenons, and elongating the slot in the tenons, as well as finally pinning those breadboards on, took me 3.5 hours, which brings our time total at this point to 6 hours and 50 minutes. Next up is the absolute most fun and exciting part of woodworking in the entire world, that being sanding. Sanding took me a grand total of 1 hour and 40 minutes to do this top, which did include the first rough sand, and then I like to water pop the grain on everything and sand it down one more time, which means that I spent a total time of 8 hours and 30 minutes to get this top ready. And thus far we have spent $209 on the materials for the tabletop, so now that that is complete, let's go ahead and move on to the legs and the apron for the base of this table. So this nasty looking lumber that I have here is 5/4 inch basswood. I would have preferred to have used poplar for the frames of this, but none of the mills nearby had any 5/4 poplar, so basswood it was. Anyway, because all of the aprons are not very wide, I only used about 10 board feet of the basswood. I got the basswood for $3 a board foot, so that comes out to a nice easy $30. And the entire milling process, including putting this dado groove on each of the apron pieces for detail, took me 50 minutes. That 50 minutes of milling does include cutting each piece to length. And one thing I've found over time is that using the crosscut sled to cut pieces to the length, especially repetitive cuts, is so much more effective than using the miter saw. And make sure that everything is lined up and that you do get the same exact length with each cut. So I bought the legs for this table from Carolina Leg Company. Hashtag not sponsored. Hashtag use the affiliate link in the product description if you want to buy these as well. But anyway, these come from Carolina Leg Company. These legs are absolutely fantastic and I've used them several times in the past. I'll be attaching them to the aprons using dominoes, and I'm using the biggest dominoes that you can buy without milling your own. When purchased in bulk, the dominoes come in at just over $1 a piece, and I used 8 of them. And if we add up the total of the basswood, the legs, and the dominoes for this table base, after tax we get a grand total of $214 spent. So the intent of this video is not to sell you on any fancy tools, but it is worth mentioning here, especially looking at the offset that I set up. The domino makes it so easy to attach these pieces together, not only accurately but very precisely. And while by no means do you need every single large or fancy tool to make this table, it does make workflow go quite a bit faster. It's been a while, but in one of my older videos where I made a table similar to this, I cut all these joints out with using true mortise and tenon joinery, and cutting all those joints out took me forever. So if you're not using a domino or some of these other tools, take that time into consideration. And at least for me, doing a large volume of builds and projects similar to this, the price of the domino is absolutely justified by how much faster that I can do things. And referencing time, we said that milling the basswood took 50 minutes, and this glue up as well as cutting all the dominoes on the legs and the apron pieces took me right at 2 hours, which is 2 hours and 50 minutes. Now in a couple minutes in the video you'll see me sand the apron of this table, which didn't take long at all because the planer leaves such a decent finish to begin with. But that brings our running total time on the base apron to right at 3 hours, with a total of $214 spent on this base. So as you see me completing the glue up, which was included in that 3 hour time, now is a good time to discuss the total cost and time it has taken us to get thus far. Between the tabletop and the table base, we have spent $423 and worked for a total time of 11.5 hours to get here. That said, it's definitely worth mentioning that the way I'm adding this up, that time does include certain things such as making all the cuts, the glue up, using the domino, but also plugging tools in, switching out bits on the domino, changing out saw blades, moving the lumber from the joiner to the planer to the workbench. So if you are thinking, I can't believe it took this guy 11.5 hours to get here, just remember that the little things do add up and take time, as well as I am trying to be extremely precise in my work. So rather than a table, I made a full dining set. The bench you see here cost about $150 in materials, and the chairs $315 for 3. The bench took 3 hours and 45 minutes, and those chairs took 1 hour to assemble. And then because I had everything assembled, I painted it all at once to save some time. So I used 1 gallon of primer, which is $28 after tax, and about 2/3 of a gallon of enamel paint, which is right at $60 after tax. Using the Fuji Q5 sprayer, this took me 2 hours and 45 minutes. For the finish, I am using Rubio Monocoat. Now I'm mixing 2 different colors, Rubio Chocolate and Rubio Cherry. Now each one of these cans cost $84, and I did order both of them just for this tabletop. However, a little Rubio goes a long way, And I will be able to use the rest of the cans of both of those for future projects, so it doesn't seem right to me to include the total cost of both cans when I used maybe a fourth of each can to do the tabletop, the bench top, and all 3 chairs. So for that reason, I'm only going to add the cost of 1 can of stain into the total price, and to stain the tabletop, bench, and chairs took me 2 hours. So at this point, we have spent a total of $1,060 on materials and worked a grand total of 21 hours. Now you could make the argument that Rubio is very expensive, which I do agree with, but the fact that it is a 1-coat system, maybe minus the maintenance oil, makes it completely worth it to me, just like the Domino. This is going to save me a ton of time by not having to do multiple coats of polyurethane. While Rubio is a fantastic finish, it is definitely a little flat when it finally dries, so I like to go back over with a coat of maintenance oil, which, just like the Rubio itself, maintenance oil is very expensive. So half a liter of maintenance oil will cost $91. Luckily I already had some, but for all the surfaces I used maybe a fourth of that can, and it took me 30 minutes, so now our running total is increased by the cost of a fourth of can of maintenance oil, as well as 30 minutes work time for this. After that maintenance oil has dried and fully cured, the only thing left we have to do in this build is to attach the top to the frame. To do this, I like to use Z-clips, so I first cut out a slot with my slot cutting router bit, and then those Z-clips can be popped into place, and a screw will go through the Z-clip into the tabletop to hold it in place but also allow for wood movement. There are multiple ways to attach a tabletop, but my preference by far is Z-clips because of their ease to use, and also they're very cost effective, as a pack of 40 Z-clips will run you about 15 bucks. I used half of these between the bench and the tabletop, so add another $7 and half an hour, which will update the running totals you can see on the screen. And now let's get into the details. Okay, so hopefully you enjoyed the video, and now that the video is over, let's talk about the burning question, which is the numbers. How much did I sell this for, and how much profit did I make? So the materials for this dining set, as we saw in the video, ended up right at almost $1,090. So I sold this table set for $2,150, which after the materials gives me a profit of $1,060. Not bad. And the total time that it took me to build this was 22 hours. So if we divide the profit of $1,060 by 22 hours, I basically paid myself about $48 an hour. So just a couple other quick things about this table. I also had to go and buy the lumber. It was about a 2-hour round trip for me to go get all this, but instead of just getting the material for this table, I got about 5 times as much as I needed, because if I'm going to pick up lumber far away, I'm gonna make my trip worthwhile. Also, a lot of times with projects, there are little hidden costs that you don't count in the materials. So we probably should include a little bit for overhead. So in addition to the time and gas money to go get all the lumber and materials, we also have to charge for things like glue, the buffer pads that we put the stain on. If you want to get really technical, you can include electricity. So all this combined may be somewhere between 20 and 50 bucks if we're including the gas money. Still, with all that, we have about $1,000 profit. The bad thing about that is, of course, is that your profit has to be included as your taxable income. So if we take that into consideration, we have to deduct another 24%. Whether you want to deduct that or not, I'll leave that up to you, but that is something to consider. So could I have charged more for this table? Probably. Should I have charged more for this table? Maybe. Again, if you have thoughts on what I'm paying myself, how much this costs, if I'm charging too much or not enough, drop a comment below, because I would really love to hear your opinion. So if you're thinking about starting a woodworking business, trying to make some extra money, you can definitely do it. And this is a really good example of that. And one thing you have to remember is that how much you can pay yourself or how much you earn will definitely depend on how familiar you are with what you're building. This dining table and bench continues to be one of my most popular items and most requested items to build. I'm very familiar with building these. I don't really have to think about everything. I know how the workflow process goes, and I didn't make any mistakes. Sometimes you'll cut something too short, you have to start a certain section over, and all that comes into play whenever you're trying to make money with this. So is 48 bucks an hour worth my time? Well, honestly, I'm really not concerned with how much I'm making per hour. It's nice to know that I'm not paying myself like 5 or 10 bucks an hour, but I still have fun building this type of project. Also, the main focus of my woodworking is the YouTube channel. One of my main goals with all of this is to substantially grow my YouTube channel. So at the end of the day, if I can get paid to have fun and grow my YouTube channel, I'm all in. Also, personally, I think this is a really good value for the quality of this dining set. So doing all this gives me the opportunity to build someone a piece of furniture that'll actually go in their home, where they'll have friends and family at this table for dinner, for holidays, and things like that. So if you made it this far in the video, thank you for watching. I hope you found this style of video both interesting and useful. Like I mentioned earlier, if you have any thoughts or comments on any aspect of this video or the price breakdown, drop a comment down below. Let's get a discussion going, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. So once again, thank you for watching. As always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I will see you in the next video, and here are some final shots of this dining set.